Hi. So today we're going to talk about reincarnation and rebirth. And of course, everyone's like, yeah, I know that's the Indian religions. Well, I mean, like from India. Well, it's actually bigger than that. And we're actually going to go back, like I like to do, more into like, how did we get here kind of an idea. How did we get to this belief in reincarnation? You know, and people will know that it's not really every single religion has this. There's some beliefs that are more universal and seem to have spread universally. Reincarnation, not so much. Although it is in the area of the Americas and in Siberia, closer to 90%, some version of. And in the Indian continent and the Vedic or Indian influenced religions, it is also pretty universal. But outside of that, it's a lot more limited. So that right there, just the fact that it's not universal all over would already make me start to think it can't be an original, religion like some people would think, or even me, that some religion ideas are very old. Now, I do think that the tree itself as a thing, as in like sky burial, could be 30,000 years old to 12,000 years old. Certainly by 12,000, we have a lot of evidence that starts to hint at this type of a thing. So, but it could go back to 30,000. It could even go back to, it started with the Gravitans in Europe and then migrated ideas over to Siberia by 24,000 years ago, and then disseminated from that place. But I don't think that's actually the belief at that point that relates probably either to a tree of life or to a world tree. Although it could later, like I saw one person had wrote that he thinks that in eastern Siberia at some time around 6,000 years ago or so, maybe the world tree concept emerges or becomes a big thing that then spreads back to Europe, into the Nordics, but also over into the Americas, and then by way of all that also maybe down into the Middle East or into India. But the original one to me, sky burials. So sky burials type of thing, burying on posts, makes sense in a world of 30,000 where there's like an ice age, where during the winter you really can't bury people, because burying for humans is at least 100,000 years old. So they already had a concept of wanting to bury people, and the Gravitans did bury people quite elaborate. But this would be a necessity if you only wanted certain animals to eat, in a sense, say a body during the winter. So putting them up in a tree makes to me logical sense. Also, in the duality sense, which we see later in Mesopotamia, of heaven and earth being two concepts, and then air splitting them. So the separation of heaven and earth. It doesn't say it is in three things. It's separation of just two things, earth, heaven. And that concept of separation of the two worlds is pretty universal throughout pagan. And so to me, probably was the concept, which would make the three worlds of the world tree of a heaven, this world, and a lower world a later concept. So as far as 12,000, here's a picture right here, and it shows Korkatepe, which is about 12,700 or so years ago, and that's a bone carving or art of a goat, and it's eating a little shrub. The tree of life, later we have it in Iran and Iraq, where the tree of life is a small shrub that an animal can get to. And if you notice, the one Korkatepe, the animal's feet are off the ground, which is the same thing that you see in Iran and you see in Iraq. It's a small tree, but one that an animal raising up, can get to. And this is, I think, important because it's not a one-off. It's not like this is something that is a guess from me. Here's a bunch of different ones of a bunch of different times, showing a whole bunch of goats. And in most of it's a small shrub with an animal. And it shows different dates and different times and different places. There's more than this. I just compiled a whole bunch to show I'm seeing a kind of similar theme. A lot of these goats have a small brush that's like, not higher than its antlers, or the brush are its antlers. And and several of them, but a lot of them also, the animal is able to stand in the brush, or the little tree is under the animal. So a little thing, or new life, like the tree of life, right? You can get what I'm saying? It's not a tree of death and life. It's just a tree of life, and it's giving stuff. It's like a positive thing. So I think that's, an important thing to remember, or what I'm trying to help you grasp. And I'll go ahead and show you a tree of life goddess right here. It's like 7,000 years old, or 7,500. See, 7,500. And it's on a bone carving. And here's the carving. And you see that little tiny tree?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So it's not the tree is not the whole thing. It's just a little part of the goddess. So in my opinion, that's probably like the other pictures showing that it's not, the tree of life is not to be understood as a full-grown tree, but more a representation of a small tree. And here's a bunch of ones. All these are under 5,000. And if you notice, every one of these are the height of the animal, or just barely the height of a person. And all of them have plumage on it, so they're not a dead tree. They're an alive, young tree. And they usually have fruit or stuff they're getting on them. And the animals, like the goats, whatever, eating them, or the animals are next to them, whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is cannot be the world tree. And if it is, it's like the mound of creation. It's the first little mound of land, and then greater grows into the whole world. If this was related to the later world tree, it would be, this is the baby tree, the potted house plant that later becomes the world tree. Just so you can understand. And it's specifically only about life and its giving of life. Just understand, because I know the concepts are similar. Now, this concept also relates to the Jews still worship this thing. They worship, the Asher, or the menorah, right, which is a representation of the tree of life. And it's generally pretty short and stubby, right, with a whole bunch of little things on it. And so it's the whole point of this, though, is it's a small, young, live tree, right? I'm trying to help you understand so you can grasp, there's a reason why I'm showing you this, so you can grasp what I'm saying. So the tree of life cannot be an exact representation of the world tree, since the world tree literally is an older tree, right? And for those that maybe don't know, I don't want you to believe me. I want you to understand, which, that's my thing, is I want you to understand, which is different than Graham Hancock's no evidence and just trust me, bro. I don't want you to trust me. I want you to understand. So the world tree is not a young tree, is it? It also is not a short little stubby tree, right?
Nope.
It says, it says the world tree represents a colossal tree which supports the heavens, and thereby connecting the heavens, the terrestrial world, and its roots, the underworld. So it's a humongous, like in the corner, that picture of the tree, humongous tree, because that mound is the mound of creation, now into a mountain, and also the whole earth in a sense. And it also says the tree is a source of wisdom of the ages. Old, right? Not young.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Not new life, but wisdom of the ages. So I want you to understand this, because this would help you to understand anyone that tries to say these are the same, because here it says it may also be strongly connected to the motif of the tree of life. Well, I want you to understand, if that is true, then this tree of life is the baby tree. It would be like the mound of creation only when the moment it started, not later when it turned into the mountain of creation and the whole world grew into that, but just the beginning point. So to me, the tree of life cannot be about reincarnation, because it literally is just the new life, or life-giving properties. Anyway, so this also in the Norse relates to the Yarrow tree. So we go there real quick, and what does it say about that? Is an immense central sacred tree. So immense. So just like the other one's colossal, this one's immense, right? And it exists in all 9 worlds. It's humongous, right? Just so you can understand, I'm not misunderstanding. I do understand, and I want you to understand. And so this also, to understand, these are still, like we talked about before about the mountains, they have to be understood, and also sort of a metaphor, right? Because the Norse, the Jarl, is the Odin's horse. So we all know a horse and a tree are not the same things, right, Dylan?
No.
Right. And so, unlike right? But you can see that the reason you could do that is if this is a metaphor. And I do think it is not inaccurate to say the world tree is a metaphor for the axis Nexus Mundi, or the center of the world, or even relating in a sense to the Milky Way, which is the pathway souls get to heaven, or shamans can travel, is sort of correct in a metaphor, not exact, but a metaphor. But it is not that this tree is a metaphor for the tree of life, unless you just mean that at the point of creation, this little baby tree, then later, not then, but later in another existence, grows into a big tree. Okay, but I really feel these are two separate concepts. Maybe they're like cousins or children, more than one being totally related to the other in a direct context. So, and also this tree for the Norse is the world tree. It says, upon which the horse, Odin's horse of the highest god, is bound. And so there are places in Asia where they actually hang bulls from the tree, which I think is tragic. But anyways, they may be referring to actually hanging a horse from a tree, just so you can understand too. Ooh. So, and interestingly enough, Odin hangs himself from this tree. See, Odin sacrificing himself upon this tree. He hangs himself from the tree. So anyways, but I don't want to go down to trees. So he, in a sense, he dies, right? Odin, he hangs himself, sacrifices himself, he dies, and he comes back. You can see where there could be, in a sense, a connection between the tree of the world and the death and the movement of life and hell and whatever. Just so you know that I don't think it's wrong to think that, but I wanted to explain it, especially in context with the tree of life. Now, we'll go to the tree of life, because I think that's an important thing to show, especially because they wrongly put the world tree in the picture for Wikipedia for the tree of life, which I don't think it belongs. Because you look at the picture down here, right? It's the two goats eating the small little tree, right? It's not going up into space or anything. It's like just barely as high as the animals that are, you know. And then you look at this one, right? There's two people, so it's not even above their heads. And also that thing at the bottom, it's actually like a potted plant. So, and then you have here is a woman, right? She's getting stuff from it, and it's not very high either, right? No. And then you have another picture of a person, and it's in a pot again, like a potted plant, right? And not real high. Anyways, and here's the one with the animals, and it's not higher than them they can stand. Anyways, my point is, so like I said, I want you to grasp these are not, to me, the same thing. So they should not be understood as exactly the same thing. So I think that's, you know, that's an important factor, because I know that sometimes when people talk about them, they talk about it fast, as if you should understand these as exactly the same thing. I do not want to make views as such. We're going to watch the clip real quick where this video, this guy is a pagan, but he is relatively scholarly. And it was like one of the best videos really about reincarnation in general. We're not going to watch hardly any of that. I just want him to basically say, you know, he says before that, you know, mythology connected and DNA sort of leads you to believe that the world tree is sort of connected to shamanism and reincarnation. So we're going to go ahead and play real quick on just him saying that.
Of course. Experts used to attribute the similar cosmographies to the influence of the Siberians on the Norse, that all actually descend from a common ancestor, a belief system originating in Ice Age Siberia.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Because we don't need to go on and on about what I already have said to you. People can go watch the video their damn self if they feel such great need to go learn more about that. And we will, of course, later do a video on the tree and stuff and how that works. So this wasn't about trees, just showing you like where it kind of starts. And also people understand a tree often during the winter looks like all the leaves, not all trees, but ones that are not evergreens, you know, the leaves fall off, looks like it's dead. And then all of a sudden, you know, spring comes, boom, it's back to life. So like reincarnation. Reincarnation also could relate to the sun and moon, although I think those sun and moon ones are probably relates more to deity, where agriculture, plants, which we're going to read, also relates to deities. But I think that's more related to the humans eventually than the sun and the moon, sort of. Because things in the sky were often considered heavy heavens and gods and things on the earth, like plants, trees, could be more related to what humans are. Just to give my what do they call that? My speculations, though educated from my knowledge, not no Graham Hancock, just absolute horse crap, wild speculation out of fucking nowhere. So real quick before we start reading this, from what I said, what are your feelings? What do you think, or do you have any ideas, or just?
Well, I already had like somewhat of a grasp on like the world tree and its distribution in the north around Siberia, but I hadn't really looked into like the distinction between the world tree and the tree of life. I knew there had to be some distinction, but I like how you explained it, like as the tree of life being like somewhat related, like but being like this baby thing, like the mound of creation,
right?
Like how you can, like if it was a real thing, the tree of life, how you could like go up to it and it'd be like life sized.
Correct.
Like yeah, but it's still like this baby thing. It could be related to the world tree, but it'd be like this younger, this much younger version, not this giant tree that you see later on that can encompass multiple realms or worlds, like heaven, the earth, and the underworld, stuff like that.
Right, and the same thing is good. I think this is important about the Mound of Creation. When the Egyptians do the Mound of Creation, it is at the point of creation, or Zep Tepi, which is like the first time. So the tree of life may relate to first time, not 1,000 years later,
Yeah,
because later the Mound of Creation turns into a mountain and then also spreads out and becomes all land. So it's no longer, in a sense, a mound all by itself. It's now like a whole flat disc with a mound maybe in the center, which becomes a mountain later and not just a mound, which is also why you see both mound concepts and mountain concepts sort of like blending. Well, yeah, it doesn't stay a little baby mound no more than it stays a little baby tree. So that's I think a good point to understand. Yeah. And it's also not called the tree of life and death, it's just called the tree of life. So I think that's important, where the world tree is considered to be the three realms of both the land of the dead and the land of heaven and the earth itself. So it's a different concept. So yeah, I think that's an important thing. So go ahead and read the title.
Reincarnation/Rebirth in Indigenous Religions, Siberia, Americas, and Aboriginal Australians, Celtic, Druids, as well as Indian religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism.
Right, and the reason I think it could have got to the Aboriginals could have came down through China or from India, because the dingo does have roots, possibly could have been 4,000 years ago from the Indian continent or somewhere close to Eastern India or, Western China or somewhere where these ideas could have come. So I just want to make the point that because some people would wrongly think, which I don't agree with, we're going to do a video on that, about how if it's in Australia, it has to be 50,000-year-old beliefs. And I'm like, no. It doesn't mean I think that there couldn't be a specific belief that could be old, but to think that they all have to be old, I know for a fact has to be flawed.
Oh, yeah.
So you get what I'm trying to say. Acting like somehow that was an isolated, never had any influence. Like, no, they have shamanism, they have totemism, and they didn't come in situ. And if they somehow had, then that would make these stuff even older. Then certainly shamanism can't be older and isn't universal. And totemism started, it looks like, in Europe. So how the heck did it end up in Australia unless it's younger when it got to Australia? Australia has a super developed, but it also has the moiety system that you see in the Americas, which we know people there are under 30,000 in general, probably even you could say under 12,000 or something close to that, 14,000. So yeah, these are younger ideas, and every single group in the Americas doesn't have this strong moiety system, although it's very prominent. It's, to me, like that's what I'm trying to say, that I do think there are ideas that are old. I don't think it's correct when I feel, my personal feeling, that a lot of people feel like everything left from Africa, and then as soon as it left, like immediately immediately all this really developed mythology happened. That's not what I see. I feel it was piecemeal. Or sometimes there's like thin concepts that this kept evolving, is more accurate than like full mythology from, the Ice Age being the only thing that, possibility. So the picture I drew is of a Native American, in a sense, duality of life and death, and person, in a sense, straddling, or the world tree straddling this idea. And then also I wanted to address, before we get into that stuff about Native Americans and everything and Siberians, I wanted to address it in stuff like Mesopotamia and in Egypt, because it is sort of in these. People don't talk about this, but I think it's because it's really more related to deities doing this than a thing that all humans universally. So go ahead and read If we suppose
the Mesopotamians believed in the eternal return, a concept that perhaps could not be on the whole likened to what we now understand by reincarnation, but similar to it, it may very well be that ancient Mesopotamians did believe in the soul's return from the underworld after physical death, that descent into the land of no return was a necessary stage, purge for unaccomplished deeds and wrongdoings, so that the spirit/soul could return again afterwards, and that this was due to the link that existed between heaven and earth, or the Duranki. Descents to the underworld.
Pause for a second. See how it says heaven and earth is two things?
Yeah.
Remember, because we talked about they had a duality sort of concept.
Descents to the underworld are a constant theme in Mesopotamia and tell about the triumph of the spirit over desire, wrongdoings, or guilt. Descent stories always contain the warning that one should not venture to the land of no return, that the laws of the great below cannot be changed and its designs the foremost. Nevertheless, Inanna descended to meet her other self, the great judge and queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, and she who is the lover and beloved resurfaced as the vision of triumphant humanity that transcends all deaths.
Right, and Inanna was also Ishtar later, which is a goddess.
Enlil descended after having raped Ninlil.
Enlil and Ninlil are gods and goddesses, just so you know.
Enlil descended after having raped Ninlil, who immediately took matters in her hands and went down after him to conquer her beloved back, achieving major growth along the process herself, from maiden to consort of Lord Air. Even Enlil, the most important of the young Anunnaki gods, had to undergo punishment for a terrible act in the most romantic and intense of all descent stories. However, Ninlil, as the beloved and hardest judge Enlil could have ever had, flew after him for the rescue to bring him back to the heights above, to become Enlil's partner in all levels. All of them faced awesome trials and returned back to the heights after achieving much healing and growth.
Right, so pause a second. So what their return is talking about is, in a sense, dying, going to the underworld, and then being brought back to life and going back to heaven, or the upper world.
It is therefore clear that returns from the underworld, despite all warnings against venturing over there, can be achieved, but only by the triumph of the spirit, by conquering one's own weaknesses, by a necessary loss to achieve a major growth.
Right, but in this reference from Mesopotamia, it seems that only deities can do this.
Yeah, it's not mentioning any like mortals or anything in this
correct.
passage.
It only mentions deities. I'm just making a comment. It's not impossible that idea then went to Siberia, where they have a belief in, spirits and stuff, to then maybe, because these ideas certainly by 5,500 to 5,000 do hit Siberia when Indo-European peoples brought this type of a thing. So it may be then attached to the sort of tree concepts they already were evolving on their own, in a sense. Don't know exactly. It's just I know when the ideas could have got there. I don't know exactly, I'm just making a comment, though. We do know for a fact they're not talking about regular. And even in the Mayan, they have where deities go down and die or get killed and then come back. But it's not talking about people. So deity being reborn is more universal than people being reborn. Just making a comment. So keep reading the next one.
Ancient Egyptian afterlife beliefs were centered around a variety of complex rituals that were influenced by many aspects of Egyptian Egyptian culture. Egyptian religious doctrines included 3 afterlife ideologies: belief in an underworld, eternal life, and rebirth of the soul. The underworld, also known as the Duat, had only one entrance that could be reached by traveling through the tomb of the deceased. The Egyptian concept of eternal life was often seen as being reborn indefinitely. Therefore, the souls who had lived their life elegantly were guided to Osiris to be born again. In order to achieve the ideal afterlife, many practices had to be performed during one's life. This may have included acting justly and following the beliefs of the Egyptian creed. Additionally, the Egyptians stressed the rituals completed after an individual's life has ended. In other words, it was the responsibility of the living to carry out the final traditions required so the dead could promptly meet their final fate.
Now, that is similar sort of to the Indian belief that karma and you have to do things to deserve, treatment. This isn't exactly the same thing, but you can see where, like I'm saying, these ideas were sort of knocking around.
It sounds similar to what you find on the Indian subcontinent.
Right.
Yeah, being
and like
moral.
I said, I never hear people bring these two up, the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. But you know me, I like to actually know all this stuff, and I've heard the ideas that are often similar, more than it seems like some other people seem to focus, And here's the thing, though. I don't believe, as you know, and I'll just say this again, I don't believe Damien is wonderful and archaeologists or historians or mythologists are somehow hiding something. I think that I have studied more stuff, and so I have a corpus of reference in a way that some other people don't. Even let's say someone's a religious scholar. Yeah, but they may have read books where other people do the studying for them. So then they know what a few other people think, but that doesn't mean they themselves have studied all the religions per se. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they could know a lot of conclusions that other researchers have come to, but they haven't spent perhaps years and years like you have combing through all of these different beliefs and doing the in-depth
research myself.
Yeah, and coming to your own conclusions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm just making a comment that I that's also why I really don't like when people, try to be conspiracy theorists and say, these people are hiding stuff. Yeah, they have lives, man. They don't spend their time, doing like me, reading obtuse stuff, and then understanding how it relates to other things. But that's also why I feel like I'm of benefit, that I can give people, a jumping off place, even scholars, a jumping off place that, hey, look at this stuff that's similar. You tell me, you still think it's so different?
Ultimately, maintaining high religious morals by both the living and the dead, as well as complying to a variety of traditions, guaranteed the deceased a smoother transition into the underworld. The books of the Netherworld contained multiple texts that provided the deceased with a description of the underworld and served as a guide to help the dead during their final journey. Since the deceased were often seen replicating the rebirth cycle of Ra as they traveled through the afterlife, these texts primarily focused on the second half of the sun god's journey, which took him through the underworld at night. The earlier books of the Netherworld, which include the Amduat and the Book of Gates, divided their narrative 12 parts, symbolizing the 12 hours the sun god spent in the underworld. Later books, such as the Book of Caverns...
Right, so just you understand. So it's 12 hours or 12 parts in the sky during the day, and then 12 parts in the night when it was, in a sense, dead, and the morning reborn as a child and then grows age and then dies, and
Later books, such as the Book of Caverns and the Book of the Earth, used a more sectionalized approach when presenting their narratives. All of these books also contained complex illustrations of the Netherworld, which could often be seen etched into coffins and the walls of burial tombs.
Right, and as it says here, there was an evolution. It wasn't that everybody thought the same. So some people say, the Egyptian religion, at what time and at what reference are you making? Because or what city? Because it's not like it's like one how people talk sometimes. Well, the Egyptians believe, who, when, what specific area are you talking about? What time? Anyways, just wanted to make that point. Also, I feel like sometimes people talk. So this relates to, we did a video already. Remember, life, death, and rebirth deities.
Yep.
That was one you did with me. Go ahead and read that.
Life, death, rebirth, deities. Examples of deities who die and later return to life are most often cited from the religions of the ancient Near East. The traditions influenced by them include the Greco-Roman mythology, and cited the examples of Osiris, Tammuz, Adonis, and Attis, Zagreus, Dionysus, and Jesus.
Oh, baby Jesus. Go ahead and read the Dying Rising God, Life.
Okay. Life. Okay. A dying and rising god, life, death, rebirth deity, or resurrection deity is a religious motif in which a god or goddess dies and is resurrected. Examples of gods who die and later return to life are most often cited from the religions of the ancient Near East. The traditions influenced by them include the Greco-Roman mythology. The concept of a dying and rising god was first posed in comparative mythology by James Fraser's seminal The Golden Bough, 1890. Fraser associated the motif with fertility rites surrounding the yearly cycle of vegetation. Fraser cited the examples of Osiris, Tammuz, Adonis, Attis, Zagreus, Dionysus, and Jesus.
And as we talked about last time when we did this video on this, people should go watch it. I said that I think it's a smaller thing, not as large of a concept for comparative religion. And so like I told you, I wouldn't have distinctly, done like a full video on just that because I don't think it's that. But I did it because I think that especially in the atheist community, anything that can somehow debunk Christianity or, there's a larger desire to emphasize that. And I told you that a real comparative religion person wouldn't care that much about that. It's not that big of a thing, category to go research on. But it's not, but I also said it's wrong when the Christians try to go, it's not a real category and it doesn't really happen. Yes, it does, but I agree it's not that big of a deal that there's not massive research being done on it. Because there's larger things. Like we're going to do a video on spirits and souls or whatever, and probably our next mythology one, just so we can start at the beginning of sort of animism, spirits, souls, and all the different ways that's understood, and then we'll do other stuff. But that's universal. That's probably like 100% of all religions in a sense. So that, or at least spirits are. Souls are a little bit less, but maybe 80%. But still, I mean, that you should do some research on that because that's literally like everything. So understanding that is massively important, which is something I would have done, an atheist or not, trying to understand religion. Understanding the rising and dying gods would never have cared about it. Not a really big thing. The only thing that makes it interesting to people is because it relates or could relate to something to do with Jesus doing it. So enough of that. Let's move on.
Okay. To me, in addressing whether there could be a category or a mythology link in dying and rising god, life, death, rebirth deities, I would like to highlight that both the sun and moon in a mythology context are often portrayed as rising and dying and rising again and again. Thus, this could be expressed in relation to a category with the idea of dying and rising gods. AI overview. The sun and moon deities are frequently depicted as rising, setting, dying, and being reborn in a continuous cycle, reflecting the ancient understanding of daily and monthly rhythms as metaphors for life, death, and resurrection. The concept of dying and rising gods refers to a category of deities in ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean mythology, popularized by Sir James Fraser in The Golden Bough. Fraser professed that dying and rising gods were ones who would undergo a cycle of death and resurrection, often tied to agricultural seasons. Utu, Sumerian. Every morning, Utu, known as Shamash in Akkadian, is described as cutting his way through the mountains of the sunrise to bring light, often depicted as a radiant god. After setting in the west, he enters the underworld or netherworld to spend the night, passing through the Mount of the Horizon, Ra, Egypt. The sun god Ra was believed to travel across the sky by day, die, or descend into the underworld at night to battle the serpent Apophis. Each sunrise marked triumphant renewal and rebirth.
Right, you can hear it's kind of similar, right?
Yeah, it's similar, but the Sumerian one, there's no battle.
True.
It's
but I'm saying, but yeah, relatively, it's the same sort of deity. It's the sun goes into the underworld at night and comes out in the morning. Yeah. Of course, right. I don't want anyone to think that these things are exactly the same.
No,
but I'm saying that they similar enough that it's you can see that there could be some influence going on.
Yeah, like you can tell, like the main message, like this god that's rising and going to the underworld. That's like pretty similar in both.
Right.
I was just pointing out, I find it interesting that the Egyptian one, they have this battle with a serpent.
Right, because and I think I've talked to you before, but we'll talk about one of these times. But so I think the serpent idea is when there's an eclipse where the moon blocks out the sun, it looks like there's a ring. I think that ring is the serpent trying to kill the sun, but the sun's still fighting back while you see rays outside of it to them in a sense, and then the sun wins in the long run because the eclipse then stops and the sun comes back. So just my feeling on it. But anyways, you can keep going.
Okay. Inanna, Sumerian. Inanna, known by the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians as Ishtar, traveled to the underworld and hung as a lifeless corpse for 3 days before being revived, mirroring the 3 days of the dark moon, a myth often associated with resurrection. Osiris, Egypt. Osiris also represents the light in the moon, with the moon dying and being reassembled by Thoth over a 3-day period.
Once again, do you hear that there's a similarity?
Yeah,
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm just
Especially
trying to show you. So not only are they dying and rising gods, they literally are sort of these versions I've shown you are kind of doing similar things and the two different religions. And I already told you Mesopotamian ideas, including religious ones, absolutely went from Mesopotamia into early pre-dynastic Egypt.
Oh yeah, we've already had some conversations about that.
Correct.
Going back to the Sumerians, yeah.
Correct. So that doesn't mean like that they gave them their entire religion, but the
No.
ideas were shared, and you can hear how there's some similarities of belief.
The motif of a dying deity appears within the mythology of diverse cultures, perhaps because attributes of deities were derived from everyday experiences, and the ensuing conflicts often included death. These examples include Balder in Norse mythology, and the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl in Aztec mythology. To the Japanese Izanami, the methods of death vary. In Germanic mythology, for example, Balder, whose account was likely first written down in the 12th century, is inadvertently killed by his blind brother Hodor, who is tricked into shooting a mistletoe-tipped arrow at him. Balder's body is then set aflame on a ship as it sails out to sea. Balder does not come back to life, because not all living creatures shed tears for him, and his death then leads to the doom of the gods. By contrast, most variations of Quetzalcoatl's story, first written down in the 16th century, have Quetzalcoatl tricked by Tezcatlipoca to overdrink and then burn himself to death out of remorse for his own shameful deeds. Quetzalcoatl does not resurrect and come back to life as himself, but some versions of his story have a flock of birds flying away from his ashes. In some variants, Quetzalcoatl sails away on the ocean, never to return. Hawaiian deities can die and depart the world in a number of ways. Some gods who were killed on Lanai by Laniquala departed for the skies. In contrast, Kali leaves the world by canoe and is never seen again.
Right, and once again, trying to put these things together to show you some of the similarities.
The Japanese god Izanami dies giving birth to the child Kagu Tsuchi, incarnation of fire, or Ho Musubi, causer of fire, and Izanagi goes to Yomi, the land of gloom, to retrieve her, but she has already changed to a deteriorated state, and Izanagi will not bring her back. And she pursues Izanagi, but he manages to escape. Some traditions tie the cycle of life and death brought about by the seasons to deities, which themselves undergo a cycle of death and rebirth. In effect, these gods take the form of a vegetation deity. Examples include Ishtar and Persephone, who die every year. The annual death of Ishtar, when she goes underground, represents the lack of growth, and her return represents the rebirth of the farming cycle. Most scholars hold that although the gods suggested in this motif die, they do not generally return in terms of rising as the same deity, although scholars such as Menninger contend that in some cases they do. AI overview. In Mesoamerican mythology, Zipatotec, our lord the flayed one, is the preeminent life, death, rebirth deity. As the Aztec and Toltec god of agriculture in springtime, he symbolized the earth shedding its dead skin in winter to reveal new green vegetation in the spring, much like a seed germinating. Zipatotec was renowned for his striking iconography. He was depicted wearing the freshly flayed skin of a sacrificial victim. This visually represented the way maize loses its outer husk to sprout, or how a snake sheds its skin. Sentaotl, who was the maize god, who was often depicted emerging from a flower, represented the cyclical death and regrowth of the vital staple crop. Quetzalcoatl, who was the feathered serpent, frequently underwent death and rebirth. In several myths, he journeyed into the underworld to gather gather ancestral bones and, in the Toltec tradition, immolated himself only to rise as the morning star, planet Venus. The canine-headed twin of Quetzalcoatl, Xolotl, is the god of fire, misfortune, and an evening star. He guided the sun through the dark underworld each night, ensuring its rebirth the following morning.
Right. So the sun going to the underworld and then being reborn is also a similar motif.
AI overview. In North American indigenous mythologies, the death rebirth motif rarely mirrors classical resurrection. Instead, it is expressed deeply through agricultural cycles and spiritual transitions. Selu, Corn Mother, Cherokee, Iroquois, and many agricultural tribes. In the immolation version of the myth, she is a mother or elder who feeds her people by secretly producing crops from her own body. When her children misunderstand her powers and kill her, she instructs them to drag her dead body across the earth. From her blood and buried flesh, corn sprouts, representing nourishment born directly from death. Iatiku, Corn Mother, Karasan Plebole, Akoma, the Corn Mother and Creator who guides the souls of the departed to the afterlife. Shipap, acting as the central figure of existence and continual cyclical rebirth.
Right. And so I do think that it is probably accurate that the corn or maize, when it moved, probably took a similar mythology, because even in other places, like it says, agricultural communities, this idea of a corn mother or something is related. So like I said, in that sense, it's probably a cultural transmission of an original idea that just kept spreading and adapting to the region. That's different than, like I said, if you were to say that the tree of life becomes a world tree in a sense. It could be two separate concepts that are somewhat related, but you know what I'm saying? Not totally, has to be spread.
Masa, or Masau, Hopi. Masa is the skeleton man and the god of both death and fire. He acts as the caretaker of the underworld, guiding the spirits of the dead and ensuring they enter the cycle of rebirth. He is deeply tied to agriculture, carrying a digging stick and a bag of seeds, symbolizing the intersection of decay, the underworld, and new life. AI overview. The Calusa, an indigenous society that dominated southwest Florida before European contact, believed that each person possessed three souls, located in the pupil of the eye, a person's shadow, and a person's reflection. Upon death, the soul in the pupil remained tethered to the body, while the two souls in the shadow and reflection were reincarnated into animals. According to historical records from the 16th century, these two traveling souls underwent a downward cycle of reincarnation, entering smaller and smaller animals, and eventually fish, until they dwindled to nothingness. Because they viewed animals as vessels for human souls, the Calusa revered the creatures they depended on for their marine-based economy. If a Calusa happened to kill a specific animal, they believed that the soul would immediately migrate to a lesser animal.
Which is an interesting thing for the cycle of rebirth.
No, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just that one. That's an interesting way to think about it.
Right. But like I said, so it still shows that ideas are similar and transmitted, but how they can also be evolved into specific groups. So the next thing I hear is an article that was written in 2022 by James Harrod, and I like it because he goes through about how many groups had the Milky Way belief and how many groups had the reincarnation and path of the souls. It's a good article. So we're not going to have you read all that. I'm just informing you. And then so this is a chart that he came up with, and he shows like which group thinks what things. I think it's real helpful. And in the check, you can see the reincarnation side. And by the way, Uralic is sort of Europe and Western Siberia, and the Kessup, I think, is Siberia. Ket is Central Siberia. Evik, I think, could be also, and Evan, these are Siberia, I think Central, and maybe Evik can also be Eastern. But Ogden, these are all, and then Mongol, all these are relating to the Siberian groups. Manchu is over near China. And all these listed, even Chucky, Nivik is far eastern Russia, and the Chucky are almost so far Russia, they're almost in Alaska. But so it's just showing these are all first ones, just because I know people don't know all these groups and I don't want to go look to each one. So I'm just telling you, every one of these has to do with Siberian groups, these first ones. And if you look at the other side, there's a check mark. Yes, they believe in reincarnation. Yes, 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 yes. Every single one. Some version of reincarnation. And then it's going here. And this is Pacific Northwest, the groups, and then the Shumash, which are California. So these are all in the Americas in a sense. And it's also showing that pretty much they all have also Cherokee and all these different groups, Ojibwe. So it's just showing all these groups pretty much also have reincarnation beliefs. And it also have Milky Way as path of the souls too. Do you see that? Boom, 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 boom. They pretty much, not as much Siberia, because sometimes they say about the upper world, and see when it says shamans go to the land of the dead using the Milky Way, which still means that it goes, that's how the souls travel. So it's just saying that the shamans are doing it. But sometimes those two will say path of the birds, which it doesn't. It says road to the ancestors, which means it's almost the same thing. But there's other ones where it says like path of the birds or whatever. But the birds generally are thought to, like, see where it says here, world tree, souls flies to the birds. Well, that's the Milky Way and the world tree are kind of related mythologically. And see it also, this next one here where it says Mongols, also the world tree, souls, and goes flies the birds to the upper world, reincarnate. But so it's just showing that a lot of this stuff is related. Anyways, so and if you look at the Native Americans, a lot of them have check marks for the birds also. So this is similar stuff. So just that's just, and you can go read the article. There's a lot of really cool stuff. That's a great article. But we're going to go down here and read this stuff. So
Reincarnation/rebirth. Reincarnation, also known as rebirth or transmigration, is the philosophical or religious concept that the non-physical essence of a living being begins a new lifespan in a different physical form or body after biological death. In most beliefs involving reincarnation, the soul of a human being is immortal and does not disperse after the physical body has perished. Upon death, the soul merely becomes transmigrated into a newborn baby or into an animal to continue its immortality. The term transmigration means the passing of a soul from one body to another after death.
Right, and so just to recap what you've learned so far, tell me what you already knew or what you kind of thought, or if you learned anything, or what are your feelings so far?
Well, one of the biggest things I've learned so far is like just how many different groups, like especially, like I already knew Siberian groups had some concept of like reincarnation related to shamanism, but just looking at all these different groups across Siberia in the Americas and like all the different traits that are associated with them, like that's something I really got to look into.
Right on.
But for other things like the world tree, I already had I wouldn't say an in-depth grasp. I'd like to do more research on that, but I had some grasp on it, like its main distribution across like Eurasia, northern Eurasia, especially Siberia, how some groups can associate like different animals and creatures with it, like serpents towards the bottom and like sometimes birds or like even deer.
Correct.
Towards the top.
Yeah, that's accurate.
But like for reincarnation, I already knew about that from Hinduism and like Buddhism with the bodhisattvas, that concept. Like for those who don't know, a bodhisattva, it's kind of like this person who's supposed to teach enlightenment to people, but when they die, they're supposed to like be reincarnated like again and again and again until every person on earth is enlightened. But like aside from that, like there's still a lot of reading I need to keep doing.
Because I've shown you a lot, right?
Yeah. But one of the things that I find interesting, that I've found interesting for a while is, and just going through this blog post right now just brings it back to mind, is how a lot of these myths focusing on reincarnation or gods that go through this process of venturing into the underworld, there's like this like odd and interesting numerology to it. Like when Odin hangs himself from Yggdrasil,
right?
He does it for 9 days,
right?
And apparently that's related to him figuring out the runes, if I remember correct. And like even the Sumerian and Egyptian, like it's they're focusing on like periods of 9 days, periods of 3 days. Like I just find that interesting how like you can figure they're related. Like the Sumerian and Egyptian, we've already talked about that. Like
right.
They like from early on they share genes, they share motifs, like how they depict statues and men, and and other traits too, but like just how so many different groups are hanging on to this numerology.
Yeah, that it definitely relates to religion. This, I'm sending you a picture or giving you a picture right now. This relates how the Norse Uralic and the Siberian beliefs spread. This gives you that orange thing up in the far eastern Russia, and also Siberia, the ones above Lake Baikal. That's the one, that area that might have 6,000 years ago or so, somewhere between Lake Baikal and that, come up with the world tree concept. So, and then that's real close to the Americas, and those people did go over to the Americas. And they also, these people then migrate all the way to Scandinavia, and then of course the Nordics. And you can see it's pretty much northern, Europe. So you can see that these people went across, and this is an archaeological thing proving how this stuff relates to the Uralic links in a sense. So, because I like to provide like more than just one understanding. Like, I know I've said that the ideas came there. I wanted to show you the archaeology, or whatever stuff that's helped back that up. And which is also what that person in that video was saying, that the DNA has helped back. That's the DNA.
No, and I appreciate you bringing up that map and like showing the different data points on there,
right?
That support it. No, right. It gives me more context. Like,
that's something I like to do.
Yeah, no, it's like you've mentioned before, like just having a more like solid grounding. That way, I'm more comfortable to talk about this stuff.
Right, because like I told you, I neither want you or anyone else to believe me. I want you to have the facts and then understand. And I'm totally open if you can figure out where I'm wrong or challenge what I believe. Unlike Graham Hancock, which sees every challenge as a threat, I see it as an opportunity to either teach you or then maybe adapt and teach myself to learn something from you, and then gain more understanding. I care about what's true, and I try to present the reasons why I think what I think is true. But it's not a dogma, and it's also like not something I thought before the evidence. I've looked at all the evidence, as you know, and that is why I think the way I think. But I'm also open to adapt and change if you can show me more evidence. And also, Graham Hancock and anybody like this, the alt thing, the reason the archaeologists don't listen to you is you don't provide them what they need, the evidence.
No,
you know why so many people find my stuff convincing and I'm not attacked all the time? Because guess what? I provide lots of the evidence.
And not just any evidence, good evidence on top of that.
Oh, well, correct. Yeah, well, that's the kind of the archaeologists and people want, or should want. I mean, this is why I don't know why you would even be offended by that. That is what they should want.
No, and that's one of the things Graham's done. He said multiple times in his books, I think. I haven't read his books in a while. I should probably go back just to refamiliarize myself with his arguments. But I know he's said it time and time again in interviews that he's provided evidence to the archaeologists, but because they're like a freaking mafia, that they won't look at it. Well, the problem is people have looked at it, and if it's not flawed, it's outdated, and if it's not outdated, it's cherry picked.
Right.
And so right there, he has this mishmash, this very flimsy, like this just it's a thing. It's it's not even quality work. It's just like thrown together.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, they shouldn't accept that. And I only challenge the stuff when I see the evidence that leads me to think a different way. And like I said too, my challenge is not, they're just hiding stuff. My challenge is like, hey, did you see this information? Do you still feel the same after seeing this information? Because I didn't.
No, and that's one of the things I've been doing in each one of these episodes we've had so far. Like, don't be surprised if like I go through a giant section and I don't say much, because a lot of this is genuinely new information for me. And so like sometimes it takes me time to like sit with this and figure out how it relates to what I know, what I don't know. I like to go back and study this stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, I know that, and I don't expect you to always have an answer. I know a lot that even people who are informed sometimes don't know or don't put things together or see see the stuff that I see. So I don't, but that's like I told you too, my goal is not to then and be mean and pick on people, because is to go, hey, and be a teacher, to be thoughtful and patient. Like I said, I told you, more important, my character of how I use that. I use evidence to build people up, not to tear people down.
Oh no, and I'm pretty much the same way. Like, I'm not going to use knowledge to bully somebody. That's not that's not how I'd like to teach somebody. If I was teaching, I'd like to evidence based, like just show them the evidence and explain my point of view on why I think this is the conclusion from the evidence.
Exactly. Like I've said before, I want to offer things as a gift, not like punch someone in the face with the truth and hoping they listen, but to offer it as a gift they can open for themselves.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Okay. Reincarnation. Panarjanman is a central tenet of Indian religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. In various forms, it occurs as an esoteric belief in many streams of Judaism, in certain pagan religions, including Wicca, and in some beliefs of the indigenous
Pause
peoples.
1 second though. Wicca is a compiled new religious movement and is not a religion that was anything that was real, because it's mixed with like 3 or 4 different, like some Egyptian, some Eastern, paganism, and some Indian stuff. Sort of like, speaking of which, one of these days we're going to do a video on Satanism and Ekankar and Wicca and talk about them. But I'm just wanting people to know, some people like, oh, this is like the traditional. There's nothing traditional.
No, Wicca, it's like you said, it's like this new age thing. Mm-hmm. It's like a mishmash.
Right. So I normally wouldn't even care that they mention anything, because I don't see that as relevant. It's like they're talking about the Jesus Christ Latter-day Saint Mormon. Yeah, that Book of Mormon, I don't need to debunk. It's literally just someone writing extra stuff. To me, I'm just saying.
Have you seen that study that showed that like a lot of the Book of Mormon was basically copied from this older book?
Yes, a book that was like, I can't remember now, but yes, I have, where it basically was just almost stolen from a book about the mountain. Like
there's this webpage, I'd have to find it again. It focuses on like very key passages, and it shows like passage by passage, like it's almost taken word for word from this older book.
But like I said, so I don't really address it, not because I don't think people believe it, but because I don't feel a great need to. I could focus on every single thing anyone believes, but I try to stay with like prehistoric religions and early stuff, and that's more what I've studied and what I focus on. So people, because also I feel like a lot of times people feel nowadays is all corruption, like Graham Hancock. It's the Ice Age beliefs. Those are the ones we need to get back to. Well, the Ice Age beliefs were nonsense, and the ones now are just another evolution of nonsense.
And in some beliefs of the indigenous peoples of the Americas and of Aboriginal Australians, the most believe in an afterlife or spirit world. Some ancient Greek historical figures, such as Pythagoras, Socrates, and Plato, expressed belief in the soul's rebirth or migration, metempsychosis. Although the majority of denominations within the Abrahamic religions do not believe that individuals reincarnate, particular groups within these religions do refer to reincarnation. These groups include mainstream historical and contemporary followers of Catharism, Alawites, Hasidic Judaism, the Druze, Kabbalistics, Rastafarians, and the Rosicrucians. Recent scholarly research has explored the historical relations between different sects and their beliefs about reincarnation. This research includes the views of Neoplatonism, Orphism, Hermeticism, Manichaeism, and the Gnosticism of the Roman era, as well as those in Indian religions. In recent decades, many Europeans and North Americans have developed an interest in reincarnation, and contemporary works sometimes mention the topic.
Right. And so people know, as an atheist and a total materialist, I don't believe in souls, and thus I couldn't possibly believe in reincarnation.
And I just find it interesting that like for North Americans, for people in the US getting interested in reincarnation in recent decades, like a lot of that I think can be pinned on like Eastern philosophy getting introduced to them like throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I know like Alan Watts, he's really popular. He's like really one of the biggest names back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to talk about Eastern philosophy. Like it was really him that helped a lot of people people get interested in it. And it's really from that point, like 60s, 70s onward, that you see this huge growth in the New Age movement and reincarnation interest.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah, I agree.
the word reincarnation derives from a Latin term that literally means entering the flesh again. Reincarnation refers to the belief that an aspect of every human being, or all living beings in some cultures, continues to exist after death. This aspect may be the soul, mind, consciousness, or something transcendent, which is reborn in an interconnected cycle of existence. The transmigration belief varies by culture and is envisioned to be in the form of a newly born human being, animal, plant, spirit, or as a being in some other non-human realm of existence. An alternative term is transmigration, implying migration from one life, body, to another. The term has been used by modern philosophers such as Kurt Gödel and has entered the English language. The Greek equivalent to reincarnation, metempsychosis, derives from meta, change, and empsychon, to put a soul into, a term attributed to Pythagoras. Another Greek term sometimes used synonymously is palingenesis, being born again. Rebirth is a key concept found in major Indian religions and discussed using various terms. Reincarnation, or punarjanman, in Sanskrit it stands for rebirth or transmigration, is discussed in the ancient Sanskrit text of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, with many alternate terms such as punaravriti, punarajati, punarjvatu, punarbhava, agati-gati, common in Buddhist Pali text, Nibbatan, Upapati, and Upajana. These religions believe that reincarnation is cyclic and an endless samsara, unless one gains spiritual insights that ends this cycle, leading to liberation. The reincarnation concept is considered in Indian religions as a step that starts each cycle of aimless drifting, wandering, or mundane existence, but one that is an opportunity to seek spiritual liberation through ethical living and a variety of meditative, yogic, marga, or other spiritual practices. They consider the release from the cycle of reincarnations as the ultimate spiritual goal, and call the liberation by terms such as moksha, nirvana, mukti, and kaivalya. Gilgul neshamat, or Gilguliha neshamat, is the concept of reincarnation in Kabbalistic Judaism, found in much Yiddish literature among Ashkenazi Jews. Gilgul means cycle, and neshamot is souls. Kabbalistic reincarnation says that humans reincarnate only to humans unless Yahweh / Insof / God chooses. The origins of the notion of reincarnation are obscure. Discussion of the subject appears in the philosophical traditions of ancient India. The Greek pre-Socratics discussed reincarnation, and the Celtic Druids are also reported to have taught a doctrine of reincarnation. Early Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. The concepts of the cycle of birth and death, samsara, and liberation partly derive from ascetic traditions that arose in India around the middle of the first millennium BCE. The first textual references to the ideas of reincarnation appear in the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, and Upanishads of the late Vedic period, circa 1100 through circa 500 BCE, predating the Buddha and Mahavira. Though no direct evidence of this has been found, the tribes of the Ganges Valley, or the Dravidian traditions of South India, have been proposed as another early source of reincarnation beliefs. The idea of reincarnation, samsara, did exist in the early Vedic religions. The early Vedas mention the doctrine of karma and rebirth. It is in the early Upanishads, which are pre-Buddha and pre-Mahavira, where these ideas are developed and described in a general way. Detailed descriptions first appear around the mid-first millennium BCE in diverse traditions, including Buddhism, Jainism, and various schools of Hindu philosophy, each of which gave unique expression to the general principle. Sangam literature connotes the ancient Tamil literature. And
real quick, I want to go to a thing and show you what the Vedic area is. So do you see the map? So it says the extent of Vedic culture. And see there's India and Pakistan. You see how the early Vedic period was, a lot was in Pakistan and a little bit in that north corner of of India. And then later it goes into India. Because a lot of people, when they think of Vedic, they just think of India. That's not really accurate. Just wanted to share that so people know what I'm talking about. Because I think it's helpful to, have a reference of what things we're referencing.
Oh no, yeah, that's helpful. Vedic, it wasn't all over India.
Right.
Especially from the beginning. It has a clear origin point in the northwest and even outside of India itself, and it gradually spreads to the southeast over time.
Exactly. Which is important to understand, because some people feel like Vedic religion is literally part of India, like it originated there only, just wanted to, because basically like now, like the stuff for Sikhism is pretty much now up in that area that's right on the border. And that's more actually, even though Sikhism is an influence of the Vedic religion with Muslim being mixed in a sense, it's in the area that was pretty much the origin of the Vedics that went into India.
The Tamil tradition and legends link it to 3 literary gatherings around Madurai. According to Kamil Zavelabu, a Tamil literature and history scholar, the most acceptable range for the Sangam literature is 100 BCE to 250 CE, based on the linguistic, prosodic, and quasi-historic allusions within the text and the colophons. There are several mentions of rebirth and moksha in the Purananura. The text explains Hindu rituals surrounding death, such as making rice balls called pinda and cremation. The text states that good souls get a place in Indraloka, where Indra welcomes them. The texts of ancient Jainism that have survived into the modern era are post-Mahavira, likely from the last centuries of the first millennium BCE, and extensively discuss the doctrines of rebirth, karma. Jaina philosophy assumes that the soul, Jiva in Jainism, Atman in Hinduism, exists and is eternal, passing through cycles of transmigration and rebirth. After death, reincarnation into a new body is asserted to be instantaneous in early Jaina texts. Depending upon the accumulated karma, rebirth occurs into a higher or lower bodily form, either in heaven or hell or earthly realm. No bodily form is permanent. Everyone dies and reincarnates further. Liberation, Kivalia, from reincarnation is possible, however, through removing and ending karmic accumulations to one's soul. From the early stages of Jainism on, a human being was considered the highest mortal being, with the potential to achieve liberation, particularly through asceticism. The early Buddhist texts discuss rebirth as part of the doctrine of samsara. This asserts that the nature of existence is a suffering-laden cycle of life, death, and rebirth, without beginning or end. Also referred to as the wheel of existence, bhavakakra. It is often mentioned in Buddhist texts with the term punarbhava, rebirth, rebecoming. Liberation from this cycle of existence, nirvana, is the foundation and the most important purpose of Buddhism. Buddhist texts also assert that an enlightened person knows his previous births, a knowledge achieved through high levels of meditative concentration. Tibetan Buddhism discusses death, bardo, an intermediate state, and rebirth in texts such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
So one quick statement about Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism is Buddhism mixed in a sense with the shamanism sort of belief of, I think it's Bon and Bu are related, and there's forms of shamanism. That's why that Tibetan Buddhism is a little different than regular Buddhism. Just throw that out there.
While nirvana is taught as the ultimate goal in the Theravada Buddhism and is essential to Mahayana Buddhism, the vast majority of contemporary lay Buddhists focus on accumulating good karma and acquiring merit to achieve a better reincarnation in the next life. In early Buddhist traditions, samsara cosmology consisted of 5 realms through which the wheel of existence cycled. This included hells, niraya, hungry ghosts, pretas, animals, tiryaka, humans, manushya, and gods, devas, heavenly. In latter Buddhist traditions, this list grew to a list of 6 realms of rebirth, adding demigods, asuras. The earliest layers of Vedic text incorporate the concept of life, followed by an afterlife in heaven and hell, based on cumulative virtues, merit, or vices, demerit. However, the ancient Vedic rishis challenge this idea of afterlife as simplistic, because people do not live equally moral or immoral lives. Between generally virtuous lives, some are more virtuous, degrees, while evil too has degrees, and the texts assert that it would be unfair for people with varying degrees of virtue or vices to end up in heaven or hell in either or, in disproportionate manner, irrespective of how virtuous or vicious their lives were. They introduced the idea of an afterlife in heaven or hell in proportion to one's merit. Early texts of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism share the concepts and terminology related to reincarnation. They also emphasize similar virtuous practices and karma as necessary for liberation in what influences future rebirths. For example, all three discuss various virtues, sometimes grouped as yamas or niyamas, such as nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, non-possessiveness, compassion for all living beings, charity, and many others. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism disagree in their assumptions and theories about rebirth. Hinduism relies on its foundational belief that the soul self-exists, Atman or Atta, while Buddhism asserts that there is no soul, no self, Anatta or Anatman. Hindu traditions consider soul to be the unchanging eternal essence of a living being, which journeys through reincarnations until it attains self-knowledge. Buddhism, in contrast, asserts a rebirth theory without a self, and considers realization of non-self or emptiness as nirvana, nibbana. The reincarnation doctrine in Jainism differs from those in Buddhism, even though both are non-theistic Sramana traditions. Jainism, in contrast to Buddhism, accepts the foundational assumption that soul, Jiva, exists and asserts that this soul is involved in the rebirth mechanism. Furthermore, Jainism considers asceticism as an important means to spiritual liberation that ends the cycle of reincarnation, while Buddhism does not.
Right. And real quick, just because I'd like you to know and not just believe me, I'm going to go to the Bon and Boo so you can see that I'm correct. 'Cause, why not? If I can do it, right?
Well, no, yeah, it helps out. And I heard your keyboard typing away earlier, so I was thinking you were looking something up.
I was. Well, that's not like looking it up. I already know it. I'm just offering you evidence so you also know it.
Yeah, you're the one who pointed it out, so.
Right, I pointed it out because a lot of people don't get why is Tibetan Buddhism distinctly different from all the other forms of Buddhism? Well, Tibetan Buddhism has shamanism mixed in at a later point, or is a mixture of both, and that's why it's different. So first we'll go to Bon. This is where it directly comes from. See, here's the relationship between Bon and Tibetan Buddhism has been a subject of debate, which I don't think it's really a debate. It is literally why it's different, in my opinion. Let's put it that way. But I know that it definitely has. It says right here. We'll go back here. It says the Bon, the indigenous Tibetan religion. So it was there before Buddhism, which shares many similarities and influences with Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah, right, exactly. So, and Bon is not all by itself. Go to the Mongolians where it came from, which is Mongolian shamanism, and that's the Mongol Bu religion, which they call it a folk religion. That just means it says here is an animistic, shamanistic ethnic religion. Right. So we'll go back to the other one so we can see that it's also shamanism, just because I want to prove that to you. Because I know what I'm talking about. It's not my first turkey shoot. I believe it or not, which I know you believe, I have actually looked at religions. Who would have guessed? So we looked here. So they reference each other. It says right here, see Bon, and if you go down, it's going to say that it. So where is it about shamanism? I know it says it relates to shamanism. Because I wanted you to see that it's important, like I said, to understand like where things come from, because then you can see why they think. Oh, here it is. It says that the study of Bon characterized the religion as animistic and shamanistic.
Ooh, okay, there it is.
So, anyways, my point is that I just wanted you to grasp that is why it is different than other forms of Buddhism. The Tibetan Buddhism that I think relates back to the Bon religion of shamanism. The Mongols goes to Tibet, and then that becomes, in a sense, the Bu turns into Bon in Tibet, and they're both similar. And then when Buddhism comes, it blends sort of with that and becomes Tibetan Buddhism. Anyways, like I said, I want you to see that unlike Graham Hancock, we can go to the evidence because my thinking relates to the evidence. But so that, like I said, so the reason also there's different versions of Buddhism. Some is for the Pali Canon and some is from India. It's also because Buddhism really took place in India, then immediately almost had to run for its life life, went to Afghanistan, became really supported under that. Then it went to China, sort of changed again. Then went to Japan, changed sort of again in Korea. So anyway, and then also traveled down to, Indonesia and different places. Yeah. With religion travels, just like whether it's the newer religions like Buddhism or older religions, like from the Middle East or from Siberia or, animism, totemism. When people move around, they take their ideas, but they adapt to the new places they go. So, all right, go ahead.
Okay. Rebirth in Buddhism refers to the teaching that the actions of a sentient being lead to a new existence after death in an endless cycle called samsara. The cycle stops only if nirvana, liberation, is achieved by insight in the extinguishing of craving. Rebirth was a key teaching in early Buddhism, along with the doctrine of karma, which is shared with early Indian religions like Jainism. In early Buddhist sources, the Buddha claims to have knowledge of his many past lives. Rebirth and other concepts of the afterlife have been interpreted in different ways by different Buddhist traditions. The rebirth doctrine, sometimes referred to as reincarnation or transmigration, asserts that rebirth takes place in one of the 6 realms of samsara, the realms of gods, demigods, humans, the animal realm, the ghost realm, and hell realms. The various Buddhist traditions throughout history have disagreed on what is in a person that is reborn, as well as how quickly the rebirth occurs after each death. There is no word corresponding exactly to the English terms rebirth, metempsychosis, transmigration, or reincarnation in the traditional Buddhist languages of Pali and Sanskrit. Rebirth is referred to by various terms, representing an essential step in the endless cycle of samsara. Terms such as rebecoming, becoming again, reborn, redeath, or sometimes just becoming. While the state one is born into, the individual process of being born or coming into the world in any way, is referred to simply as birth. The entire universal process, beings being reborn again and again, is called wandering about.
Right on. So do you have any thoughts that you want to share, the stuff that you've learned or you already know, sort of in relations that we've done so far?
No, again, I just find it interesting how, with the traditional, biblical view, it's just a flat, heaven and hell.
Right.
Especially with heaven, there's not scales, depending on how virtuous you are in life, you'll get a more, perfect heaven or something like that.
Right.
It's not described like that at all.
Well, but there is parts of, speaking of that, there are parts, certainly more probably the Christian than anything closer to Judaism, but because Judaism doesn't really talk about that. It talks about Sheol being the underworld and place where your bones wither away. Probably more influenced by the Greeks and maybe, other Proto-Indo-Europeans sort of ideas. And hell certainly matches the English word hell. So hell, it was Nordic, matches the English word for hell, sort of just one more L. And certainly those ideas pre-exist them, so it could relate to why the Christian, have more of a Hellenistic sort of a view in a sense. But also the Christians are influenced by the Persians and more than per se the Jews were when the Bible was being written, I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And so I think their ideas are the more evolved. And so their ideas, not only because you said heaven, but there are ideas that you have different house sizes, like mansions or not as nice of a house. So you're kind of correct. They don't have a level of hell, a level of heaven, but there is supposedly quality of your domicile or whatever that's superior or whatever, depending on who you are. So it's still some sort of a hierarchy kind of system, at least what I've heard before. So I agree with you. It may not be that you're in a totally different heaven, but you're definitely not all getting exactly the same stuff. It's not just in the gate and then everyone's all the same.
See, because that's how, the churches, where I'm at, in Maine, or just throughout my life, that's how I've heard heaven described. It's just it's almost like this flat, one person's not getting more than another. Just heaven's heaven. It's there's not scales to it, what we've read for the Eastern concept of heaven in India.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there definitely is.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'd have to look into it, do more research on just the Hebrew Bible to see how they're framing it.
Well, the Hebrew Bible, no. This is a Christian thing, not Hebrew. So here,
Well, the Christian. It doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a history to it.
well, no, I agree. It
Familiarize
doesn't come out of
myself.
nowhere.
I want to familiarize
I think it comes out of
myself
the
with it. I
Greeks.
want to get to the roots.
Yeah, I think it comes out of the Greeks. Well, look at here where it says here, AI overview. The concept of houses in heaven varies across religious, mythical, and creative tradition. Commonly refers to theological realms of afterlife and star division, personal dwelling space within the divine kingdom. And said biblical dwelling places. The Christian theology Jesus mentions, in my Father's house there are many rooms. Scholars suggest it implies tailored to individual dwelling places. See, and it says right here the three heavens. Many Christian tradition categorize heavens into three realms: the earthly atmosphere, the first heaven. But anyway, I'm saying, so there's other one, the 10 heavens of Enoch, the Jewish mystical text or whatever. But so, yeah, there's definitely, I agree with you that it's not universally taught, but it is there are some beliefs that there are a division. Just, it's a story. We can all make up our own. So,
Well, yeah, that really just hammers home like what we've been talking about. Religions are going to migrate around with different cultures, and they're going to evolve and change. Like they're going to adopt new practices, get rid of older practices.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, it's like even like so Buddhism, right? So some people say that the stuff written in the Pali Canon is the original Buddhism. Some people are like, no, Sanskrit's the original, writing of Buddhism. Other people are like, no, some of the ideas that are in Tibetan Buddhism have to be the original. Well, they found a thing called like the Buddhist Dead Sea Scrolls or whatever. They're actually birch bark, and they weren't found in the Dead Sea, but
the Buddhist Dead Sea Scrolls.
I know you think that I'm going to go look that up because I'm telling you there is.
Well, no, I haven't heard of that before, and just the way you worded it.
Well, actually, they word like that, the Buddhist Dead Sea Scrolls, so that way you know what they're talking about. But it's birch bark. It's not really Buddhist Dead Sea Scrolls. It's more like. But I'll show. I'm not. Once again, Dylan, Damien is informed and has evidence. So just to prove that, we're going to go to the Dead Sea Scrolls of Buddhism, which of course it wasn't by a sea and doesn't have to do with scrolls exactly. They're birch bark, so they're not papyrus or something. But my point is just you said that, so I like to go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. And it was see those little things written on there. They're like little pieces that have writing on them. But anyways, so the point reason I wanted to bring this up is they went ahead and looked at this, right? It talks. This is a whole article on it. Well, there's actually more than this too, but that you can go read. People want to read it, But this is a real thing that people found, and what they found is that there's versions that support all forms of Buddhism being somewhat correct, but also these are the oldest, by the way. So everyone talks about what's the oldest. These are the oldest writing of Buddhism, and it gives support for every version of Buddhism. There's little aspects, but it also contradicts like every form of Buddhism also. So it shows Buddhism is both has reasons that they all can say they have some element that's true, and it also shows that they're not all following just the original. They all added stuff in a sense. So it both says it's true and not all true. So yay. But anyways, once again, there's this thing called facts that is important that you know. And, I love facts because we can all just talk about theories or what's possible. But that facts help ground us into what actually happened. And then we should build our thinking or speculations from that point. Yeah, so my point of bringing that up, though, is just it's funny because you laughed. And I was like, actually, that's what they kind of call them.
I know about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I haven't heard about like the Buddhist version, like these significant ancient pieces of writing. I'm going to have to check that out later. That's pretty cool.
Well, see, don't you feel like I always tell you something you didn't know?
Oh, yeah. No, and I like that. I like how can I put that? I like learning new stuff,
Yeah, and I've that's why people think like, Damien, you're so opinionated. Yeah, I have fucking learned a lot. If you learned as much as me, you would have probably stronger opinions. In other words, like some people think that I'm just bold because I'm arrogant or something. I am arrogant, but I'm also bold because I've learned stuff, and that makes me understand. Like I told you, when you're like me and you look at all the religions practically through all time, and then you also look at all the languages and the different beliefs and where things came and how migrations happened and where the stuff happened and where stuff started and how it moved, you kind of get an idea.
Yeah. No,
Which
yeah.
I guess-
It takes time to put stuff like that together.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
First, you have to learn it, of course. Yeah.
Oh,
Then you
yeah.
Then you have to put it together. Then you end up with long blogs and like 3-hour videos because there's so much I have to say and want to say to try to help you understand. But like I said, you see that I know all this stuff, Dylan, but you also see that I don't do a lot of attacking people and belittling people and trying to use my knowledge or some kind of like arrogance to feel I'm better than people. And that's why I said other people, they feel that that's what the way they want to do, you go for it. If you feel that gets you more followers, I guess go for it. But for me, I really care about being a thoughtful, caring teacher. I want people to feel good after learning from me, not like, abused.
Yeah. I'm pretty much the same way.
Well, no, that's why I like you and felt like you have, a lot of stuff that mirrors what my goals are in a sense. There's a way of doing it. I don't think it's just enough. Like my goal was never to become the most informed, like, some sort of arrogance. It was to become the informed so that I could understand and then have better thinking. And then when I did that, I realized, wow, I need to share this because other people could benefit from having better thinking from being informed.
Oh yeah, that's the right way to go about it, I think. Like learn to inform yourself. Don't just learn to go around and like tell people, hey, look how much I know about the world,
Right.
But I mean, one of the things, like before I go on to the next part, like one of the things I've noticed that really stands out with your blogs and the videos you've done is your evidence for your theories that you base your artwork on. It doesn't look cherry picked like at all.
No.
That's what I like appreciate about your work. I mean, like compared to Graham Hancock, or just compared to like some of these other like history theorists,
Right.
like especially a lot of the ones nowadays that'll claim they're going back to the source, but their source are like a handful of books from the 1800s.
Right.
And like they're using that as like their source of quality science in history before like modern archaeology somehow corrupted it.
Yeah.
But no, it really pays having research that isn't cherry picked, because it'll help build a foundation for later research if you plan to do that, which
Right.
is
And like
something
I said,
I need
or
to
other people, but you could learn my stuff and then now have all these new avenues to go do more research than I've done. I mean, I didn't, spend my whole time trying to figure out only Buddhism. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. Well, no, like just this one blog right here, just for like Buddhism, Judaism, Jainism, and like all these other like religions with aspects of reincarnation. It's just a whole lot of references that I could add to like my research toolkit, to put it one way.
Right.
It's more info for me to draw on, and like that right there is incredibly valuable.
Well, thank you.
No,
Like I said, my goal is to not, like you said, not cherry pick. I know this is crazy, but I want to know like what the truth could be. That's like a real big deal to me. Like speaking of this, right? So I'm going to show you a map of the spread of Hinduism because I already showed you the origin of the Vedas. So I'm going to show you a map of the spread of Hinduism because I like facts and it really helps, I feel, to understand. Then the map of the spread of Buddhism. So here's Hinduism and how it spread. You see it?
Yeah.
But we already know where it started,
Mm-hmm.
on the border pretty much of Pakistan and India, but you can see where it spread to.
Yeah, it started in the northwest and then gradually spread down into the southeast.
Correct.
But I find that really interesting how it spread so heavily in the southeast and into Indonesia rather than like the strong spread like westward or northward.
Right, and some of that is
that's
actually
incredible to me.
because of trade.
Oh,
because it's like the Silk Road later. This has to do with trade routes. They were sending ships and mariners, and they became, in a sense, missionaries, sort of, for this belief. There's a whole bunch of stuff I've watched before on how that relates, but it's very, very similar to that kind of idea. So I'll show you also the Buddhism, because I think it really helps, because especially people talk about this stuff, but they don't really know what they're talking about. And you see right there where Buddhism and how it, moved around. So it went a lot more to China and the northern, areas than the southern route specifically, which it did go the southern route also, just like Hinduism before it also with trade, but it also went north, which I think is interesting to understand how these, because a lot of people just think of the Christian religion and the spread of that, but I think understanding these other religions is important also. And as you see,
not just what you pointed out with different religions, especially Christianity, but I just think it's worth pointing out that like Hinduism and Buddhism, they can originate pretty much in the same continent, in the same region. Yet where they spread to is completely different.
That is true.
That's really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things also that's different about them is Hinduism is more of a hierarchical, and Buddhism is more of I don't know if it's exactly non-hierarchical, but it's more of like a availability to the general public than the Hinduism per se, which I could see where it would be more desirable for a larger audience in a sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So,
but at least from what I've read about it.
Right. Well, like I said, there's certainly, I'm, simplifying it. So I'm not trying to give like the whole rendition of what they did and why. Just trying to give like a simplified sort of version of why, these would be, just like some people say Christianity, spread more than the Norse belief because the Norse are mainly focusing on that go to Valhalla, like if you die in battle. And so what about all the other people that don't do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Where Christianity is saying everybody, even lowly people, even murderers or whatever, can go to heaven, So it's giving it, or people that are murdered, or something, or people that just die of old age or whatever. It's more for the general public than say the Norse specific warrior cult belief. So I can see that doesn't of course explain that also it was about trade. Why did Vikings switch to Christianity? Well, if you're trying to trade with all these Christian areas and you want to go through without fighting every time, or you want to have better trade deals, then I'm Christian, allows that to happen easier, and you don't really have to do it. In fact, you could still believe some of your old beliefs. You just tell people you're Christian, and I can see where there's a benefit of that too. But also, a lot of Christianity was forced on people. A lot of the people Norse didn't decide, like king decides to become Christian for whatever reason, and then mandatories Christian the belief and goes and kills everybody that doesn't. I mean, just like some of the first pagans killed, were from Christians, just slaughtering pagans if they didn't, convert to Christianity. So it's always, and I'm not saying that the same thing with Buddhism or, Hinduism. The spread of religion is not always a simplified thing. I'm not trying to present it as that. But like I said, to me in general, my goal of my videos is not to give you like the full history of these things. I'm trying to show you a general thing that we already talked about many times, that religion is a cultural product, and it moved in cultural migrations.
Yeah, so you're like trying to give like an in-depth overview of like these various topics.
Right, because I feel like once you grasp and I'm trying to show again and again and again and again, multiple ways, this is an accurate assessment. In other words, what I'm also really trying to get you to believe is, or think different, is that you shouldn't believe these as like reality stories, but like just cultural stories that were transmitted. So we don't need to look for an afterlife or whatever. I think you should be a good person because that's a good thing to do.
Okay, I'm gonna read this next part here, classical antiquity. In philosophy, metempsychosis, ancient Greek, is the transmigration of the soul, especially its reincarnation after death. The term is derived from ancient Greek philosophy and has been recontextualized by modern philosophers such as Arthur Schopenhauer, Kurt Gödel, Mircea Eliade, and Magdalena Villaba. Otherwise, the word transmigration is more appropriate. The word plays a prominent role in James Joyce's Ulysses and is also associated with Nietzsche. Another term sometimes used synonymously is palingenesis. The earliest Greek thinker with whom metempsychosis is connected is Pharisee Pharisees of Syros. But
Let's click
Pythagoras...
on that real quick just so we can figure out who that is and what time.
Pharisees of Syros, 6th century BCE, was an ancient Greek mythographer and proto-philosopher from the island of Syros. Little is known about his life and death. Some testimonies counted Pharisees among the 7 sages of Greece, although he is generally believed to have lived in the generation after. Others claim he may have been a teacher of Pythagoras, a student of Pittacus, or a well-traveled autodidact who had studied secret Phoenician books. Ooh.
Right, and I always tell people I'm an autodidact. So let's click real quick so we can see what that means.
Autodidactism or self-education, also self-learning, self-study, and self-teaching, is the practice of education without the guidance of teachers. Autodidacts are self-taught people who learn a subject through self-study. Autodidactism may involve, complement, or be an alternative to formal education. Formal education itself may have a hidden curriculum that requires self-study for the uninitiated.
Right on.
But Pythagoras, who is said to have been his pupil, is its first famous philosophic exponent. Walter Burkert has argued that Pythagoras may have introduced metempsychosis to Orphism. He suggests that modern scholarship's tendency to separate Orphism from early Pythagoreanism is a retrojection, possibly of Nietzschean ideas about the opposition of the Apollonian associated with Pythagoreanism and Dionysian associated with Orphism. Whereas for the Greeks, Apollo and Dionysus were brothers and not so clearly differentiated. Pythagoras offered as evidence for metempsychosis his own recollection of past lives, a superhuman form of wisdom that contributed to his reputation as a prophet. Early Greek discussion of the concept dates to the 6th century BCE. An early Greek thinker known to have considered rebirth is Pericles of Syros, roughly 540 BCE. His younger contemporary Pythagoras, circa 570 through circa 495 BCE, its first famous exponent, instituted societies for its diffusion. Some authorities believe that Pythagoras was Pericles' pupil, others that Pythagoras took up the idea of reincarnation from the doctrine of Orphism, a Thracian religion, or brought the teaching from India. Plato, 428 through 425 through 348/347 BCE, presented accounts of reincarnation in his works, particularly the Myth of Air, where Plato makes Socrates tell how Air, the son of Arminus, miraculously returned to life on the 12th day after death and recounted the secrets of the world. There are myths and theories to the same effect in other dialogues. In the chariot allegory of the Phaedrus, in the Meno, Timaeus, and Laws, the soul, once separated from the body, spends an indeterminate amount of time in the intelligible realm. See the allegory of the cave in the Republic, and then assumes another body. In the Timaeus, Plato believes that the soul moves from body to body without any distinct reward or punishment phase between lives, because the reincarnation is itself a punishment or reward for how a person has lived. In Phaedro, Plato has his teacher Socrates, prior to his death, state, "I am confident that there truly is such a thing as living again, and that the living spring from the dead." However, Xenophon does not mention Socrates as believing in reincarnation, and Plato may have systematized Socrates' thought with concepts he took directly from Pythagoreanism or Orphism. Recent scholars have come to see that Plato has multiple reasons for the belief in reincarnation. One argument concerns the theory of reincarnation's usefulness for explaining why non-human animals exist. They are former humans being punished for their vices. Plato gives this argument at the end of the Timaeus. Mystery cults. The Orphic religion, which taught reincarnation about the 6th century BCE, produced a copious literature. Orpheus, its legendary founder, is said to have taught that the immortal soul aspires to freedom, while the body holds its prisoner. The wheel of birth revolves, the soul alternates between freedom and captivity round the wide circle of necessity. Orpheus proclaimed the need of the grace of the gods, Dionysus in particular, and of self-purification until the soul has completed the spiral ascent of destiny to live forever. An association between Pythagorean philosophy and reincarnation was routinely accepted throughout antiquity, as Pythagoras also taught about reincarnation. However, unlike the Orphics, who considered metempsychosis a cycle of grief that could be escaped by attaining liberation from it, Pythagoras seems to postulate an eternal, neutral reincarnation, where subsequent lives would not be conditioned by any action done in the previous.
Right. So also it's down here in Celtic paganism, and it says here it was prevalent among the Gauls and the Druids of Gaul. Anyways, it also is in German paganism and also in some forms of Judaism like the Kabbalah, sort of. And then it can relate to Christian ideas and Gnosticism and also Taoism in China, and then the European Middle Ages, and then early Renaissance. But then also, to me, going back to the Siberian stuff, the cosmic hunt has the animal is killed and hunted and goes up and becomes the stars, also relates to the Milky Way, sometimes chasing the animal up the Milky Way before it becomes the stars, and sometimes killing it on the Milky Way. Sometimes the Milky Way's color is the blood of the animal that went up there. And then I have a thing here about this Milky Way and the souls and where the different places that it's believed. And to me also, I think that like speaking of stars and animals, I think it's possible that these pointillism references in Paleolithic Europe could relate to that concept. And then here is a trinity where you have, I talked about before, a trinity, where you have a lion, a bull, and then the vagina with the legs of each animal making up part of that sort of group body, which is 37 to 33,000 years old. And then the horn relating to a female, which that obviously kind of does, and is also seen here where there's a female figurine and it's 35,000 years old, in Italy, and it's holding like could be an antler, and then 25,000 years old females holding looks like horns. And some people say that the lines on the horns, the markings, could be like stages of the moon or cycles before period, a woman's period, relating to sort of fertility and pregnancy. And then the myth, sort of like beliefs in the watching the moon could go back 34,000 years ago, the different stages of the moon, everything in that. And this is a thing talking about the Trinity, maybe, that I think it's possible that thing could relate to the sun, the moon, the star, and that sun, moon, and star is pretty widespread and could go back. I don't know for a fact, but I just go back. Tepe, has a thing that could be a version of this, and other sites seem to also kind of. And then the three beings or females is also seen. So don't know. And this right here, I think this scene of they call it the dead man. It could be that because the head of the person looks like a bird, which is kind of like their bird figure they have on a stick or whatever, or a long leg, and the penis of the person looks kind of like the bull. So I don't know if they're like, could be to me some form of reincarnation or rebirth happening or something, like the bird and then the bull and then back, something could be. They think that could be a spear that, cut open whatever the guts of the bull. But I think also could be that whatever that is could be like it's birthing and then it follows the cycle of life, death. And then, because it could be that my point is, it could be that's like an egg or something. Then it becomes the bird. Then the bird becomes this human that dies by the bull in like a cycle. And then the Trinity here, I think, could relate to the moon of like, these are different figurines that were found. And I'm just saying maybe the reference is up being like the beginning, the full body. And this is also not from Egypt. This is from France, but the full body maybe being the full moon or pregnancy or something, old age. And then the other being the dying, the underworld, that some of these figures were put in mortuary context. So it could be. But we do know that certainly at some point, stars and animals were related. Once again, the stories, the mythology of the cosmic hunt, animals turn into stars. So this also could relate to that, but they do believe that all these ones in this red box are the sun. So it's a specific star, which they didn't actually know was a star. But so, and then this on the side, this is relating to probably Bes or Hathor, in the Egyptian religion. This is before that time, and it's different figurines showing the stars on or as the horns or goddess or whatever. So then I have a thing here that shows the 1, 2, 3, this different stages. Because the reason I'm trying trying to show this back at the beginning. We talked about, I think that maybe the reincarnation could be the life, death, rebirth of the sun and the moon as a reference to kind of how it started. Then this picture I made kind of helps understand that. The birth little child, the pregnant woman, and the old woman, and then the cycle of when the sun is out and then the sun goes through the underworld in a sense. That's when the moon comes out and vice versa. And then I've already showed you before where the bull and the woman are metaphors, and they're showing that these two things, can kind of relate, the stars in the sky and the animal. And then hands up, or like the bull horns, relates to the letter A, and that's where we get our letter A in the alphabet. And also the bull sign and then the hook, which means strong controller, has to do with the name or the symbol that meant the L, or the god of the Bible. So there's a lot of stuff. Go ahead and read Sumerian mythology and then Amerindian Alaskan.
The struggle between good and evil colors, Siberian mythology. This is shown in the myth of creation involving Ulgan and Erlik. Ulgan symbolizes the most important positive aspects of Siberian life, including food, water, and warmth. Erlik is a symbol of death and sickness, but also of overconfidence and lust for power. The idea of rebirth is also found in the myths of the Siberian people. In the tale of the man who destroys the extra sun and moon, the destruction and remaking of the hero's body may symbolize the making of a shaman, during which person is reborn with magical powers. This theme is also seen in the myth of Morgan Kara, who could bring the dead back to life. American Indian and Alaskan Native. Although American Indian and Alaskan Native populations comprise many distinct groups, the belief in reincarnation is common across many tribes. Death is viewed as a natural part of life, not as the end, but as the beginning of a new life. Although death should not be feared or avoided, life is seen as a gift that should not be disrespected. As a result, self-destructive desires should be kept under control.
Right on. So that's all I want to address, basically. It's not my biggest thing of reincarnation, but I think that we span the gamut of what I wanted to, highlight of its sort of origins and how varied it is across cultures. Especially, like I said, I wanted people to understand it's not just Indian continent beliefs.
No, yeah, it's widespread across Eurasia and even beyond Eurasia. It's in the Americas too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of links in the blog also that people can go and do more research if you're interested in it. I don't have a serious interest in reincarnation, so. But also, this is the last video from my 20 video series that I wanted to do of just addressing these sort of like core things. We're going to do more mythology stuff, but now I'll be able to just jump around and do whatever I want and not specifically stick to, things that were just this. I have all kinds of blogs and all kinds of other stuff already. So it's not like I have to go write new ones. I wanted to get this stuff done because there's a whole bunch of things I felt like people didn't really know and had, or limited understanding of. And I felt like it's important to hit a bunch of these core things so that it can help people, become more informed.
Well, no, yeah, and that helps me out. I actually learned quite a bit from this one. I learned from each of your blogs, but this one I already had some familiarity with Siberian, shamanism and the world tree, like we had talked about earlier, and a little bit of their concept of resurrection or reincarnation. And I've spent more time reading about reincarnation religions in Southeastern Asia, mainly in India, related to Hinduism and Buddhism.
Right.
But I just find it incredible how widespread and how similar a lot of these mythologies are, especially the reincarnation one.
Yeah.
And like how I'd mentioned earlier, the symbolism, not just the symbolism, the numerology in some of these, that's something I want to research more and get a better handle on.
Right on. Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to learn and your desire to become informed. It's a great quality.
Well, yeah, I like researching. I haven't spent a lot of time, not as much as I'd like, researching religions and mythologies. Just lately, I've mainly been looking at what farmers were doing over in Europe at the time the OCC was flourishing, because I've researched, some people will call them the old Europeans,
right?
The first gold graves found in southeastern Europe, the earliest copper, shaft axes, things like that.
Right.
I've actually researched that quite a bit. But right now, I'm just tidying up some of my articles in my folders. That way, I can actually present represent something that's polished.
Yeah, no,
So
for the gold. Speaking of gold, the Varna
there it is.
grave is pretty cool. And
yeah.
also, to me, what's interesting too is that people don't seem to focus on that much. The Varna grave also has a whole bunch of other graves with these fake heads that also have the gold jewelry. And if you look at it as a corpus, that one person has the most, and the next mount is these fake heads, like ancestors or deities or something, have the next most, and then all the rest of the little tiny bit of gold is distributed on the other people. So I think that is, and then that head, which kind of matches these masked things of clay that are buried with the gold. That head was found in a lake not that far away. So no, I think it's interesting. But as you know, to me, I want people to grasp sort of like how everything sort of came together. How did we end up with these beliefs? And I think this is just a rough idea. To me, it's not like one took over and then the other one wasn't there no more. Animism doesn't go anywhere. Even with progressive organized religion, it has spirit beliefs. So it's just, to me, like Legos. They just keep packing up on top of each other. It's not that they go anywhere. It's just that people add that plus other stuff. And that's, I think, to me, an important thing that people need to grasp.
Yeah.
That these, religious ideas are accumulating.
Yeah, they can accumulate and they can change and adapt depending on the regions they go to and the cultures they encounter.
Exactly. And so that's why I think it's important to grasp that, because a lot of people, like, they look at, that's this old type of religion. My religion is different. It's like, no, your religion is an evolved product of that other stuff. It's not, something completely different. Like, I'll show here. See, this is my thought, that religion stacks the supernatural ideas like Legos. It's building a wall. The one at the top is not removed from all the ones below it. It's literally an accumulation of all the ones below it.
Oh, yeah.
So, and like I said, it's important to grasp this, because also people somehow look like, look at that, older religion that's, bad. And I'm laughing going, yeah, it's all these different languages all mixed together and forming what you have now, all these ideas that were from other places that you've stacked all together and call it something different. Yeah. To me, like I've said, I'm an atheist, and anti-theist and anti-religionist, and why I'm competent is because I understand science, and I understand the archaeology, and I understand the philosophy how to think. And when you put all those together, I don't see how you can believe non-real things.
Oh yeah, it's a powerful trifecta. Yeah, it's a trifecta that more people should have from day to day.
Yeah, and as you know, even though I'm anti-theist, that's not like I hate people that have theism. It's my dislike for theism, which I see as just a bunch of lies. They're presented as truth. Go ahead and read that right there.
I am against all religion, and here are 3 harmful things common in all religions: pseudoscience, pseudo-history, and pseudo-morality. What makes some believed truth is actually true. To me, truth, in general, is a value judgment we place on what we think or believe is evidence or reason. Therefore, the rational imperative on us, as intellectually honest thinkers, is to demonstrate that the proposed evidence or reasoned assumption is actually of a high standard, with as much valid and reliable reason and evidence as possible, from a credible source as possible, which then makes some believed truth actually worthy to be seen as epistemologically true, thus a justified true belief. Do you have such justification? By claiming to know something by faith is to act in a way mirroring a dishonest thinker, as intellectually honest thinkers don't claim knowledge without justification. My goals against religion is to fully stop forced indoctrination, as well as help debunk the belief in religions and all magic claims.
Yeah, that's my goal, is because it's
a worthwhile goal.
I want people's freedom. That's an important thing to me. Like, some people, it's like I said, their goal is to pick on people. That's not my goal, because to me, if you start thinking you're out, atheism is not needed. Just think of the millions of children being indoctrinated who need our help with truth. There's a drastic reason why I feel it is important to do. Like I said, I try to do it in a way that's a person who's a friend to the world, not an enemy to the world. world, but that doesn't mean that I don't see the ideas as harmful and spreading, nonsense. And I want people to, come to the conclusion, because they realize that faith isn't reasonable. These mythical ideas aren't reasonable. The gods they offer are not ethical. Just think, are you free? Any path that leads to me as a slave is never going to be something I ever willingly choose. I am free. You are free. Are you not? Anyone who challenges my freedom deserves my wrath, not my love, right? Enslaved. If you don't have a master, whose slave will I be? I want everyone free, don't you? Or are you in support of the master and welcome being a slave? To the person questioning, I just advise you to read more and research. I hope you will be guided by the right path. I am a stranger in a strange land called humanity because I actually don't welcome being a slave. How about you? Are you a free man or a slave? God talk has always just been the master talking out of your mouth. How disgusting the idea that a God would want a slave rather than my freedom. I am a free person.
Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead and tell people where they can find you, and or give us your ending thoughts, and then tell people where they can find you, and then we'll go ahead and end the video.
Well, no, I'll give a short little wrap up of my thoughts about this episode so far. No, I enjoyed it. It's given me actually a lot to think about with reincarnation mythology. But like I've said before, like with this topic, I'm most familiar with the Siberian or Northern Eurasian and like Southeast Asian aspect of it with Hinduism, Buddhism, like especially Buddhism related to India and later on in like Eastern China and Japan. But looking at all the other like regions with reincarnation mythology, especially the Americas, where a lot of my research focuses on, that's stuff that I really need to get a better handle on, like looking forward.
Right on.
So I appreciate you, taking your time to schedule this episode. That way I could go through it with you. I really appreciate that.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It was my pleasure. I like I said, I want people to grasp this stuff in a broader way.
Oh yeah, and I mean even beyond this, I just want to grasp the whole, like a lot of your work a lot more, especially with the origins of religions and mythologies. Because where I was going with my little statement on like the old Europeans, I eventually want to put together like either a series of maps or like a big like thesis almost comparing and contrasting like two of the earliest like complex metalworking regions on Earth that we know of, and that would be the old Copper Complex and southeastern Europe / parts of the Middle East. Around 6,000 years ago. I mean, there's metalworking. Yeah, there's metalworking before then, but when we really start focusing on like everyday usage of a variety of tools, it's really like 6,000 years ago. And in southeastern Europe, you have that associated with farming societies of different scales. But then you look over at the OCC, and there's little to no farm. If anything, it's like practically like barely any horticulture. It's all just like fishing, hunting, and gathering.
True.
So that would be like a really interesting thing to put together.
Yeah.
I think it would challenge like a lot of assumptions on what people think is possible.
Oh, I think that the old copper culture definitely does that in general.
Oh yeah, but okay. Aside from that, that's still a little ways off. I still have some stuff to do with the whole European thing, mapping out different artifacts, getting a handle on those. But it's making a lot of progress.
Right on.
Okay, so if you want to find me on social media, you can find me on X, you can find me on Blue Sky and Reddit at Copper Violet. You can find me on academia.edu at Dylan Violet, and you can also find me on Facebook at Dylan Violet. If you want to reach out to me more professionally, I always have an email, copperviolet@gmail.com.
Right on. Well, everyone, I appreciate you stopping by, and take care.
Okay, yep. See you later, everybody.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.